Australia's Future Fund is now worth $82 billion. It was launched in 2006 to cover public service superannuation obligations. But it's far from the developed world's biggest sovereign wealth fund. That honour applies to a country with a population the size of Sydney. Little Norway, with its huge oil and gas reserves, has managed to share around the benefits of its resources boom. Europe correspondent Philip Williams travelled to Norway to see what Australia could learn from its Nordic friends.
Until the 1970s, Norway's economic future was governed by age-old industries. But the discovery of massive oil and gas reserves changed everything.
Well, welcome aboard. We're on a Norwegian ferry on a fjord heading for a rather special place. Now, it's absolutely freezing. Goodness knows how many degrees below zero. But we're heading for the warm economic heart of this country. Not just its present, but also very much a supercharged future.
The road to riches has not been easy. Extreme conditions have made extractions of the black gold more than challenging. And as oil production slowly fades, demand for natural gas is soaring, more than topping up the revenue. This is the Gassco gas complex at Karsto on Norway's west coast. It's where the gas from the offshore rigs is processed, ready to fuel the world.
Well, this pipeline here disappears in Norwegian soil. It next emerges in Germany. In fact, Norway produces about 20% of Europe's gas needs. And as the gas pumps out of here, the revenues pump straight back into the wealth fund, which is getting wealthier by the second.
Some of the basic figures for Norway would be that we transport approximately, or export slightly more than 100 billion cubic meters of gas per year. In money terms, that would be equivalent to something in the order of $60 billion per year. That is the value of the gas as such.
How would that break down for each day, do you think?
I would just approximate that to be in the order of 100 to $150 million per day.
So during the time of this interview, you've made probably a few thousand, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands maybe.
I haven't made all that money. The Norwegian government probably has.
The Norwegian government, or more accurately 5 million citizens, have done very nicely from the oil and gas bonanza, but it's no accident. The Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund is the largest in the world. Currently, around $660 billion have been siphoned off via a 78% tax on revenue, invested in 7,000 companies around the world, including in Australia.
How does it feel to be one of the most powerful investment advisors in the world?
I don't feel like that at all.
Chances are you've never heard of Paul Hugerud, but his chief advisor on where the billions go, he's the Bill Gates, the Warren Buffett of global financial advice.
Well, it's a fund for future generations, both current and future generations. And that's a responsibility for us to make sure that not only this generation, but also future generations get a fair share of the petroleum wealth. Because it's
a one-off.
It's a one-off. It is a transformation of wealth. We used to have wealth beyond the North Sea, and now we are transferring that into financial assets.
Already the fund controls more than 1% of the world's shares and bonds, all very deliberately invested outside Norway.
Well, if we had just spent the money, that would have caused, of course, a huge pressure on the economy, and it would be a very high pressure on the industrial sector of Norway. We have that pressure today, but it would have been huge without the fund, without setting the funds aside, both because of the spending and also it would have done something to the currency.
Successive governments have agreed to spending limits of around 4% of revenue each year, and this wealth pipeline has also extracted an ethical dividend, with 55 companies dropped from the fund.
Well, we don't want to be invested in companies that produce nuclear weapons, cluster bombs, etc., and tobacco. And then there are some 17 companies that are excluded based on conduct.
When the last drop of oil and gas makes all this redundant, Norway will have an endless stream of income forever. a security appreciated by the next generation of Norwegians. Back in Australia, academic, author and journalist Paul Cleary has written a book about what he sees as Australia's wasted opportunity.
The reason why at the moment we're drawing all this investment from around the world is, I argue, we've become the sweet spot for resource extraction. First world governance with all that safety and security and the rule of law, but actually third world rates of tax. And that's part of the problem is, unlike Norway, we're not generating the revenue from our resources sector that we could then be channeling into a sovereign wealth fund. And that's a really key difference between Australia and Norway.
Australia's future fund doesn't draw on revenue from mining directly. Its $82 billion in savings have come from ordinary budget surpluses and funds from the sale of Telstra. Paul Cleary says poor countries like East Timor and Papua New Guinea put Australia to shame when it comes to converting natural resources into long-term savings.
I think we have a great complacency in the way we look to our future, and we don't really think about what it's going to be like for our grandchildren. And I think what it will be like is we'll have a huge number of empty holes in the ground and nothing to show for it.
At some point, the resources magic in both Norway and Australia will begin to fade. The Norwegians are well placed, gliding on a solid financial base, supported by billions, if not trillions of dollars invested in places like Australia. The legacy of the boom for our future generations remains less certain. Philip Williams, Lateline.